First met Gus about 60 years ago in my first teaching class when I joined the university, and Gus was in a class there with Don Nicklin and others. After Gus graduated, he worked in the Department of Supply for several years. Then eventually he came back here to undertake a higher degree and eventually became a demonstrator in the department, looking after the practicals.
So my first memory of Gus Wiles was when he taught me in 1978. He was in charge of the chemical engineering laboratory, and here is the front page of my report. The first one that Gus marked. The blue writing is what I did, the red is Gus's critical comments. He wasn't known for being an easy marker. However, it was the start of a good relationship, and I knew Gus as an undergraduate student, as a postgraduate student, as an academic staff member in chemical engineering, as a colleague, and then when I was head of Department of Chemical Engineering at UQ. He was a great guy.
I'm Kate O'Brien. I'm a senior lecturer in chemical and environmental engineering, and I studied here in the 90s, and I knew Gus when I was studying here, and I came back as a lecturer in 2002, and so I've had lots of interactions with Gus over the years. But if I mentioned a few, one would be if you came in on a weekend, you had to do some work for something and you'd be in there on the weekend, you'd be just as likely to find Gus photocopying something out of Perry's Chemical Engineering Handbook. And he'd look at you like you just walked into his lounge room on a Sunday morning as if, what are you doing here? So he really was a feature of the place. Or you might walk into the staff room on a Sunday afternoon, 6 p.m, 7 p.m, Gus would be there eating a can of peaches and look at you.
Well, Gus was obviously Gus at UQ Chem Eng, but Gus also knew my wife's family in water polo. He was the Australian manager of the water polo team. One time, I think it was over in Italy, where my wife's brother was playing, and they'd lost their caps, water polo caps. Then all of a sudden Gus appeared with some spare caps, which made my wife's brother say, number one, Gus, what are you doing here in Italy? Number two, how did you know we needed caps? So yeah, he was always there for everyone. In fact, at the funeral service, it was very interesting. It was like we had some time there to meet all of his family and other friends, and it appears there was 100% Gus Wiles in UQ Chem Eng, 100% Gus Wiles at water polo, and 100% family Uncle Bob. So he was amazingly a person that could be 300% at different places at different times. So.
When Paul Lamp became head of school, he decided he wanted to take all the second year students to Gladstone as part of CHI 2001 process principles. It's quite a big and complex field trip to organise, and so what he did is he got Gus to do it. And Gus of course had all the industry connections, and he actually had organised the whole thing, from the transport of the students on the buses to the accommodation to the sites. And it was quite complex because there wasn't enough accommodation at one place. There were 150 students and they all had to stay in different places, and there were 10 to 15 sites and the buses had to go here. Everybody had to be fed. It was a very big undertaking. And on a number of occasions Paul would say to him, so Gus, what's happening with the field trip? And Gus was keeping the details close to his chest, and when Paul asked him, he would almost take it as a bit of personal offence and go, well, if you want someone else to organise it, well, that'd be fine, And so we all had to go there on faith. We didn't know whether the food was arriving or what the buses were doing. It was all just happening. And of course everything worked, everything. And everything had been done with bits of yellow sticky paper with Gus's distinctive red pen written in capital letters all over it, of course, to his, people that he knew and former graduates. And it was terrific.
Oh, Gus, yes, he had a photographic memory, definitely. Even when he was convalescing up at the hospital, I brought up an old picture of our class. We were going to have a 30-year reunion, in fact, having it this year. And I showed him the picture of our class, and he could name every single person. But it was interesting, he went past me, not knowing me, and I said, oh, I think you're missing somebody. And he sort of just said yes. He pointed back at me saying, yes, I'm not sure who this girl is. So Gus was he knew his humour still. That was just Gus's normal dry humour. He was always up for a bit of a chat. In fact, that's why he was successful, I think. He always brought humour around the department, and you could always chat to Gus about anything from your life, personal life, to career development, to technical work. It was just like this was his family, and he was, the key person that was in charge of our family, making sure we were all not taking life too seriously, but able to work hard too. So.
Oh, many smokers with Gus was there, yes.
Yeah?
And several of Gus's own functions he put on.
Yeah?
One I went to, Gus didn't turn up. He'd organise his house, he'd put the food and drinks out for everybody, then put a message say he had to be somewhere else, and he didn't turn up that night, so we had a Gus party without Gus.
Gus rang us up one day to ask me and a number of his friends to a dinner party. We had a great night. Gus hardly said a word all night. He just kept a big smile all over his face. Later, after his death, we realised that he knew that he had the Order of Australia. And when someone is approached to see if they will accept the Order of Australia, they are bound by secrecy. They may not tell it until the fact is published at in the newspapers.
When he passed away, he was a single man, and at his bedside, you know, the young men around him were saying, "Oh, he's a really nice bloke, wasn't he? Isn't it a shame he never had any family?" And he said to them, "Oh, I had thousands of children, and they were all boys," because he taught in a boys' school. So when I think of Gus, and you know, occasionally I heard people say, "Isn't it a shame he didn't have family?" And I think, oh no, he had a very, very big family, and they were all chemical engineers.
So chemical engineering had some great leaders over the years in the early part of my career. People like Don Nicklin, Ming Leong, Paul Greenfield. But Gus provided the glue between the generations of students right up from those early days to the most recent times. He knew the names of all the students, he helped them get jobs. He was a wonderful support for them. He was a great and unique person and a great and unique member of staff at Chemical Engineering, and he'll be sorely missed.
Studying on exchange was my first time not only living away from home but also living in another country, and this provided a lot of challenges in itself. I had to learn to live independently, had to learn to cook. I don't know that you should put that in.
I was fortunate enough to receive the Gus Wiles scholarship, and that enabled me to go to the University of California, Berkeley to study chemical engineering. And it was the most amazing experience that I've had as a student at UQ. I want to thank everyone who has donated to the fund, and especially Gus Wiles. Without this, I wouldn't have been able to experience what I did, and I can't thank you enough for it.
So because I received the scholarship, I was able to spend a whole year on exchange, which meant that I got to study a really diverse range of chemical and environmental engineering subjects, some of which aren't currently on offer at UQ, so global environmental governance and the history of water in society. That gave me a lot of new and fresh perspectives on environmental issues. Although I never met Gus, his generosity is going to have a lasting impact on my life and career, and I would like to thank all of the graduates of chemical engineering at UQ who've donated to the fund over the last couple of years, so that students like myself can continue to have these fantastic overseas experiences.